I'm Carson Horn, and it's time for another edition of Talkin' Tumors, where I break down the latest happenings in Auburn athletics. Let's get rolling. Welcome into this special edition of Talkin' Tumors. I am Carson Horn. As you can tell if you're watching on YouTube that I'm not alone today. I am joined by a special guest, Brit Bowen. Brit, super excited to have you on the show today. Don't have many guests on this show, so it's really a great honor, I think at least, to have someone join me, and I could not be more excited to have you join me on today's show.
Carson, I'm excited as well. Thank you for having me, and you've done an awesome job with this podcast at WEGL. I want to be the first to say, because this podcast studio that we're sitting in and recording today is still relatively new to WEGL, and you've taken this opportunity by the horns, and it's been great to watch you grow in this. So I'm excited to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I appreciate that compliment. And if you don't know who Brit is, let me give him the proper introduction here. He is the Weagle advisor, but you probably know him more so from his play-by-play broadcasting for Auburn softball, Auburn women's basketball, as well as you probably heard him some on the SEC Network, SEC Network Plus, doing other Auburn games. So he's very, very talented, very good at what he does, and that's why I'm super excited to have Brit on the show today. And Brit has done so much for me at Weagle. He played an instrumental role in us getting this podcast studio, which has been so great for not just me, but so many other people that have been a part of Weagle. And so I just really wanted to have him on the show as a way to thank him, but also so he could provide some great insight on Auburn athletics that I don't necessarily have. So Brit, again, thank you for joining today. And if you will, just provide a little bit of your story. You graduated from Auburn. What was that like, and how did you get to the role that you're in now?
Yeah, sure. It was kind of a long road, but I will give you the Cliff Note version, if you will. I'm an Alabama native from South Alabama, down in Monroe County, a small town called Excel, Alabama, and this is the only place I applied to go to college at after community college. Auburn's been home to me ever since I was born. I've been coming here since, again, my parents started bringing me when I was a baby, and it's always been that second home. So I came to school here, joined WEGL as a senior, and that is one of my biggest regrets in college, is not doing that earlier. And like a lot of students at Weagle, I got involved wanting to do play-by-play broadcasting. I started with Auburn soccer, and then that transitioned to Auburn softball. From there, as a student, I got an internship with Auburn IMG Sports Network. Yes, it was Auburn IMG Sports Network. We've changed names so many times that it's starting to fade from my memory. From there, I got into a TES role with WEGL in student involvement. And from there, that slowly transitioned to a full-time role all the way back in 2015. This is my 10th year at Weagle. Ever since I started broadcasting Auburn athletics, from a student at Weagle to an internship to just a part-time employee, I've been very fortunate to be somewhat a part of the Auburn Sports Network ever since I was a student. So I'm very, very fortunate in that.
Well, I would say you're a big part. Again, you do a fantastic job on your broadcast. Always enjoy listening to you whenever you're calling a game, especially with Auburn softball and Auburn women's basketball. And that's where I'll start today, is with Auburn women's basketball. And they've just hired a new coach. Well, it's been a little bit now, but still, will be a new head coach this season, and head coach Larry Vickers. He comes over from Norfolk State. Last season was the last season for Coach Jay and her tenure at Auburn. Things didn't necessarily go as hoped. There were some injuries, some different issues with the rosters we all know took place this past season. But Larry Vickers comes in from Norfolk State, where he had a 177-99 record, won 4 conference titles while he was there, had a record 30 wins last season. Yeah. I remember I covered the Norfolk State at Auburn game this past season. I think it was in December of 2024. And I remember, at that time, I had no clue he would end up being the Auburn coach, but I remember being impressed by that Norfolk State team. Their defense, their effort in that game really stood out to me. And so when he was hired, I remember, I covered that game, so that was kind of a neat connection that I made. But what are your overall thoughts on Larry Vickers and what he brings to Auburn women's basketball?
Yeah, sure. He's a great basketball mind. And if you look at Coach Vickers and his tenure at Norfolk State, I mean, one thing that's consistent, all he did was win since taking over that program. He had to build it from the ground up, and not only did he win, he won at a high level. And I think the one regret that he had, and this is coming from his press conference when he was hired at Auburn, is he never got a chance, or excuse me, he had the chance but never won an NCAA tournament game. That was the one thing that he did not accomplish. So I know he's excited to be here. Auburn's a place where if you have the resources, you can come in and win. And for Auburn, if you look in Auburn athletics as a whole, Auburn women's basketball, Auburn softball did it a decade ago. They exploded onto the softball scene at a national level. They had never really done that before. Auburn women's basketball has done that, right? It's just been in the Joe Champy era. So Auburn does have the history. You have DeWanna Bonner along part of that history, part of the Coach Nell Fortner days, and Auburn's had some good players since then. Unique Thompson has come through, Honesty Scott Grayson most recently. So Auburn has had their flashes of success. What Auburn's looking for now is consistency. And for Coach Vickers, like all coaches in their first year, he needs time. He needs time to recruit. He needs time to implement his system. But make no mistake about it, Auburn got a very good basketball coach in Larry Vickers.
I think you made a really good point there with consistency. That has seemed to be the elusive trait that has kind of gotten away from Auburn women's basketball over the last several years now, and hopefully Coach Vickers can bring that to this Auburn women's basketball program. But you also made another really good point, I think, with whenever a new coach is coming in, giving them the proper time. And, of course, college athletics is changing, and every day it seems like.
Well, and to that point, when he took over, I mean, even Soraya Daniels, who is now on the roster, she was in the transfer portal technically, I think, when he got hired. So he took over this program with no returning scholarship players. So the roster this next year is going to be completely new. You've got Soraya Daniels coming back and Caitlin Duhon, who played half the year last year for Coach Jay. So it's going to be a lot of new faces. It's going to be a lot of transition. I think this upcoming year could be the equivalent of maybe year two of what Coach Jay in her tenure and what they accomplished. So it's going to be a rebuild. That's just where we are as a program. But with Coach Vickers, again, knowing his coaching style, having seen it not once but twice. Remember, he played Auburn 2 years ago right after Christmas. Auburn beat a very good Norfolk State team the year Auburn made it to the NCAA tournament under Coach Jay. That was still a competitive basketball game for Norfolk State. And then, of course, for Norfolk State and Coach Vickers, they came in. He coached a great game against the Tigers just last year. And I'm like you, that present moment in time, we didn't realize he was going to be our coach, but here he is. And if you look at his resume, his track record, I'm excited to see what he can do at the SEC level.
I am as well, and you already hit on this a little bit, but yes, I believe two returning starters two returning players from last year's team. That is it, and you have, I believe, 3 freshmen coming in, and then I think the rest are transfers. So really a new roster, which I know is not all that uncommon in college athletics now, but it still doesn't make it any easier just because other teams might be dealing with the same.
Sure, absolutely. And I think one of the things that he is going to emphasize while being at Auburn, and is something that Auburn hasn't had since Janiah McKay, and that was back when Coach Flo was here, and that's a true point guard. He wants to build his team around point guard play, and that's something that I'm excited to see evolve, and I'm excited to see those players develop under his system. The 2 returning players, again, Soraya Daniels, she got some good late starts in the year. In her game, if you look from the first weeks of the season, her playing time to how well she was playing down the stretch of last season, she had some good quality minutes for Auburn, and she got better as a basketball player over the course of the season. And she's going to have, I know, an increased role in her sophomore campaign. And then, of course, you have Caitlin Duhon. Duhon, a defensive specialist, and Coach Vickers' style of play, she is going to be on the floor. She's going to be a key part of what Coach Vickers does defensively for Kate. And Kate will be the first to tell you, I know one of the areas she wants to improve is her offensive game. She does have a quick burst of speed. She's got a nice little pull-up. But that's an area of her game I know she'll be looking to improve going into her senior campaign.
That's great insight. I really appreciate that. Breaking down the roster, What are the fair expectations, would you say, Britt? You mentioned Joe Champion, how
Sure.
successful, as many Auburn fans probably remember, Auburn women's basketball has been in history. Can Larry Vickers get Auburn back to that level? Is it fair to necessarily expect that? I mean, what should Auburn fans expect of Larry Vickers, not just this year, but overall for this program?
Overall, Auburn wants to be right now, I think, a consistent attendee to the NCAA tournament. I mean, Auburn wants to be in the mix in the SEC. It's been a long time. It's been since DeWanna Bonner was last at Auburn, since Auburn won the SEC regular season. I think it's been since the 90s since Auburn made it to the Sweet 16. So for Auburn, look, you always have that expectation, I think, across the board, because if you look at every single Auburn program, name an Auburn program in Auburn athletics who has not been on the national stage at some point in the last 20 years. You can't find one, right? So the expectation for Auburn is to win. And I know that's Coach Vickers' expectation. To how long it will take to get there, I don't know the answer to that, truthfully. But I can tell you, year one with a head coach, with a new head coach, a new staff, an entire new team, Auburn needs to give them time. Auburn needs to invest in them, invest in that program, because I can tell you, when Coach Bruce Pearl took over at Auburn men's basketball was not at the top of the SEC. Same thing with softball a decade ago when the Myers came in. Coach Dean kept the Tigers relevant, and now the Malvos are here trying to build on that success. You look at Auburn baseball. Coach Pulowski had an okay year here or there, but never was consistent. Look at where Coach Butch Thompson has the Tigers. So, point being is, if you invest and you commit to winning, you can win in Auburn. It's just going to take Coach Vickers some time, and we've got to give him and his staff the respect and the time to do so.
I completely agree. And I look forward to watching his tenure. I'll look forward to the Auburn women's basketball season getting going here in the late fall, early winter. And, of course, they'll have a big offseason ahead of them to get ready for that season. Transitioning now, Britt, to a season that ended not too long ago. That is Auburn softball. You do play-by-play for Auburn softball as well. So you have a great vantage point of this Auburn softball team. I enjoy watching them this season. This was the first season under new head coaches Chris and Kate Malvo. They had a 35-24 overall record, ended up losing to Florida State in the Tallahassee Regional Championship. What were your takeaways from year one of the Malvo era?
It was an exciting year of the Malvo era, and I think we got a good glimpse of just how good Auburn can be under them. And I think we got a good glimpse of how the Malvos can develop talent. I mean, you look at Annalee Adams, a freshman who came in. Auburn had a slew of seniors coming in who you look up and down the lineup. I think most of those seniors will tell you they improved in their senior campaign. And, of course, obviously the big question mark moving forward is going to be pitching. And they haven't shied away from that. They'll be the first to tell you, they had to bring some kids in last year. They had to fulfill the huge shoes left by All-American Maddie Penta. And by the way, her counterpart, Shelby Lowe, who was just as good in a lot of her outings in the circle. So that was a tough thing to overcome, right? And S.J. Garing came in, Haley Rainey came in. Those two were a solid 1-2 punch for Auburn. S.J., without her efforts in the NCAA tournament, she put the team on her back and carried Auburn into that winner-take-all regional final. So she will be back next year for the Tigers. The big question mark for Auburn, though, next year will certainly be, how do you replace 9 seniors, right? Because most of those kids were starters. I think right now Auburn's only got 1 position player returning, 2 if you count Auburn's catcher as well, so Kylie Brockman. So not a lot returning. So, again, it's going to be a big summer in the transfer portal for the Malvos, but I look forward to that next recruiting class after that, because that's a class that I know they are excited about. But for the Tigers this year, it was a roller coaster of a year. I thought what punched their ticket to the NCAA tournament was that hot start in February, going down to Clearwater and sweeping that tournament was absolutely huge. You run into a tough SEC schedule where you had to play, I think, 4 top 5 teams in the first month of SEC play. It was a tough start, but for Auburn, make no mistake about it, a lot of people question the NCAA tournament, whether or not teams should, or all SEC teams should make it if they have a winning record. Auburn finished tied for last and still worked their way in. But you look at who they beat to do it. I mean, they beat Georgia, they beat South Carolina, and they beat a good Kentucky team. All three NCAA tournament teams. Auburn had the resume, and then, of course, they went to Florida State. That was a tough regional. I mean, played a South Florida team that was as good a hitting team for a non-power 4 team. That was as good as hitting team as Auburn has seen this year. And then to work their way out of the losers bracket and do what a lot of people didn't think they would be able to do, and that's beat the number 4 national seed, Florida State. They may have been number 5. I can't remember. It was a month ago. But that was huge. That's something Auburn had never done in Tallahassee in their 4 trips down to a regional down in Tallahassee. So all in all, I thought it was a very good first year for the Malvos. There's a lot of excitement around that program. There's a lot to build upon. And for them, I thought it was so big and so important to get NCAA tournament next to their resume for year one, because that makes a difference, Carson, going into the portal and you're trying to recruit a kid. Hey, why should I come to Auburn? Well, they've got that in their back pocket. They've got that weekend to build on, and that's a lot different and would have been a lot different, I think, if had Auburn not made the tournament. So all in all, a successful year one. Year two, I do encourage Tiger fans, much like Auburn women's basketball, be patient in year two. Auburn's going to have a lot of turnover next year. Again, I'm not saying Auburn can't make the tournament. They absolutely can, but what I'm saying is it is a lot of roster turnover next year for Auburn softball, losing 9 seniors. So it's just going to be a different look. So expectations for that team, of course, with the Malvos, I know their standards obviously is to win, but how they do it, what their strengths will be, that remains to be seen.
I agree with all your points there. I think you made a lot of really good points. Watching this Auburn softball team this year, I was really impressed by their energy, the way the team played together. Of course, I thought they were really solid hitting team this year. I think, as you mentioned, the pitching probably was the weakness, if you will, but you had to replace, as you mentioned, Maddie Pinta and Shelby Lowe, who were outstanding.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the togetherness, because if you watched the NCAA tournament regional down in Tallahassee, every player on that lineup, or in that lineup, had a big moment at some point in the weekend to either give Auburn the lead or help Auburn maintain the lead, whatever the case may be. And as they got through the first game of the losers bracket, and truthfully, I didn't think they played necessarily bad in the first game against South Florida. But those kids, they made it that far because they believed in one another. They were playing for one another. And you get an NCAA tournament regional play, there's more pressure added. And then you've got 9 seniors on top of that. Reality starts to punch you in the face and saying, hey, this could be my last weekend of Auburn softball. And to watch all of that come together, to play for each other, and even when you talk to the Malvos after the game, the coaching staff, just how emotional everyone was, because you said it, that they believed in one another, and truly they were a family. And if you watch that team and you know that team, just not surprised by the fight and the outcome of them fighting out of the losers bracket of that weekend.
Absolutely. I'm excited to watch this softball program continue to grow, and I fully expect them to be competitive in the SEC. But you do have some people who will say, well, you're in the SEC and you're in there with Texas, who just won the College World Series, and Oklahoma. Can Auburn truly compete in the SEC? What would you say to that?
Well, let me say this. I mean, a decade ago when Auburn came exploding onto the scene in 2015, did anyone expect Auburn to do that? I don't think so. In 2013, Gus Malzahn, Auburn football, did anyone expect Auburn to do that after the season they had in 2012? So my point is, yes, they can do it. And again, do the right pieces have to be in place? Yes. And that starts from culture all the way up through development and recruiting and so forth and so on. But can it be done at Auburn? I am a firm believer, yes, because there isn't a sport at Auburn, women's basketball, softball included, where if you invest, you can't win at a high level. Now, is the SEC tough? Absolutely. And that's the part, and that's one of the things I'm so excited about for Auburn in both basketball and softball is to get back in the top 7, get back in the top half of the league, even get in the top 4 and get back in the conversation for competing for conference championships. Because if I can tell you, and you all know this, if you compete for a conference championship in the SEC, that means you're probably going to be good enough to be a national contender come March or come May towards the end of your season. So right now for Auburn, that's their goal. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. But I'll say this. Look at Coach Yo and Ole Miss in women's basketball. What a job she's done turning that program around. I think it was my first or second year for Auburn women's basketball. Ole Miss, I think, went winless in the SEC. Yo's either first or second year at the job in Oxford. And now they are consistent visitors to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament. Who would have predicted that? Ole Miss women's basketball, who I think didn't have a great history at the time. So I think we're in an era where you have to adjust and off the court, but also too on the court, and that's why I'm so excited for the possibilities for Coach Vickers and also on the softball diamond with the Malvos. They are all great coaches, and Auburn fans, if you haven't met them, I encourage you, if you see them out, go introduce them, come support them. More importantly, come to the games. Auburn women's basketball, Auburn softball, two fun sports to follow, and I look forward to seeing you all at those events coming up this year.
I agree. I cannot wait to watch both Auburn softball next year and Auburn women's basketball, both, I think, programs that are headed in the right direction. I appreciate your insight on both of those, and again, you do a terrific job broadcasting those games. Transitioning a little bit, you're talking about expectations. I want to transition to Auburn baseball, whose season just ended in the Super Regionals, losing to Coastal Carolina. But it was a phenomenal season. Look, this was an Auburn baseball team that was coming off what was a disappointing season a year ago. It was a down year, and Auburn fans have become accustomed to Butch Thompson and this Auburn program consistently competing for championships and putting themselves in position to make it to Omaha, and that didn't happen last year. But down years happen, and this coaching staff, Butch Thompson, those players responded so well this year. They got up off the mat, and they became one of the best teams in the country, ranked as high as number 2 in the country, I believe it. At one point in this past season, the number 4 overall seed in the NCAA tournament ended up winning the regional, sweeping the regional, and then just got beat out by a really good and a really hot Coastal Carolina team that has now won, I believe it's 23 straight games heading to Omaha. But it was a really phenomenal season. I had a lot of fun watching them this year. And you know, with Butch Thompson and his staff at the helm, that Auburn baseball isn't going anywhere. And this season was big for this program to reestablish itself at the top of the sport.
Absolutely. And I'll say I wasn't surprised at all by Auburn baseball's turnaround, because Coach Thompson and his staff, with Gabe Gross, Coach Donamaker, and that crew, Coach Tiefert, I mean, those guys, they have done it. They have built it. They've been consistent. Yeah, Auburn had a down year last year, but anyone criticizing Auburn baseball for not being consistent, I want to encourage you to look at the last national champions in the SEC. Look at the next year that they had after winning the national championship. Not very good success if you look at the last 5 national champions, again, the year following the national championship. So for SEC baseball, I would argue that's one of the hardest sports to sustain success because of just how deep the league is from top to bottom. And that's the case in a lot of sports in the SEC. But baseball is one of those I would put at the top. Auburn's offense this year, I thought Auburn's offense was as good as anybody's. And Auburn's offense, led by Ike Irish and Cooper McMurray, I thought that offense was the reason Auburn had a chance to make a run in the NCAA tournament. They got out of the regional, but one thing you have to have and you have to be able to do, and that's beat elite pitching, and credit to Coastal Carolina for that. I thought that was one of the big differences in the Super Regional. Not that Auburn's pitching hasn't been good, but Coastal Carolina pitching, even with runners on base, they pitched themselves out of some big innings. They had the defense to back it up. And for Coastal Carolina, let's not forget, they won the 2016 national championship. That is a great baseball school. Auburn should not hang their hats at all for losing to Coastal Carolina in a super regional. Hats off to the Chanticleers, but for Auburn, a lot to build off of from this baseball season and Coach Thompson going into next year. And you can already tell this week the Tigers have already hit the portal, and they've already made a few new additions.
Yes, and that was what I was going to mention. Auburn baseball isn't going anywhere. Yes, Auburn's going to lose some really key players and guys like Ike Irish and Cooper McMurray, but Auburn has already been to work in the transfer portal, I believe, up to already 5 additions.
Yeah.
A couple were made even before the season ended. Really high-level players as well, both pitching and in some pretty solid hitters and defenders as well. And I think this Auburn baseball program's in a really good spot. I think we've talked a lot about the support and investing in programs today on the show, and Auburn baseball has really seen a lot of investment over the past year into the program, both from a standpoint of the facilities as well as in NIL, and I think that has helped a lot for this program.
Well, and that's where I want to commend Athletics Director John Cohen and his staff for what they've done with Plainsman Park in Auburn's baseball program. We've seen it throughout the year with the renovations to the ballpark, the different clubs, the different suites that fans now have access to, the War Eagle Wall out in left field, adding seats to that. And then, of course, the NCAA Regional. I mean, the improvements, just when I thought they couldn't make any more improvements to the park, they kept coming up with new creative ways. They put seats on top of the batting cages. They made more seats available, I think, on the terrace. I mean, just the investment into that ballpark, I think some of Auburn's success this year should be credited to some of those improvements, because Plainsman Park, in my opinion, now, and it had the potential. It's always had the potential. But I think Plainsman Park is now in the conversation for one of the best college baseball atmospheres in the country. And if you question that, well, just go back and look. And yes, even the Coastal Carolina Regional, go back, look at the crowds, listen to how loud it was. And I can tell you, every player in that Auburn dugout, every coach in that Auburn dugout would probably agree. And but again, that's the benefit of coming to Auburn. You know, going back and talking about softball, women's basketball, any sport, you come to Auburn, you invest, especially like Auburn baseball has, you can be successful. But the great thing about Auburn baseball now, Auburn baseball is at a time where, you know, you talk about consistency. You know, back in the early to mid 2000s, consistency was tough for Auburn baseball. They had a year here or there. Coach Butch Thompson, much like Coach Bruce Pearl in men's basketball, has brought consistency to that program, and I agree with you. Auburn baseball is not going anywhere.
Yes, and to echo what you said on the environment, I was at every single regional game and at every single, and both the super regional games this past weekend. And yes, the environment was excellent. I think Auburn baseball posted on their social media today that Auburn had the 5th highest on average per game of any baseball program in the country. So really, really great environment, really great support for Auburn baseball, and a fantastic, fantastic season. Of course, hate it came to an end this past weekend. Would have loved to seen them make another trip to Omaha, but I have a feeling they'll be back there sooner rather than later. Transitioning now to the nearest season, as we've nearly wrapped up the athletics year for Auburn. Track and field still going. They'll finish up this weekend, but after that will conclude the athletics year for Auburn, and then we'll transition into the next year, and that will bring in another season of Auburn football. So, Britt, I graduated this past spring. I had 3 years as a student, graduated a little early, so maybe this year will be different, but I had 3 years that weren't necessarily the most enjoyable to be a student as far as Auburn football goes. Now, I was very blessed to have Auburn basketball and baseball had the success it had, but football, not so much.
Hey, well, listen, I'll take you back to when I was a student. I graduated in December of 2013, so go back to, I transferred to Auburn in August of 2011. I went to community college my first 2 years of college. Of course, 2010, Auburn won the national championship, but I wasn't a student at Auburn yet. I was in college, but not a student at Auburn yet. So I came to Auburn the year after the national championship in 2011. 2011 was okay. 2012, as you know, was awful to be a student in the student section for Auburn football. But I did the victory lap, took an extra semester in 2013, interned that semester, was a student, and did get to experience the Miracle in Jordan Hare and in all those great moments in 2013. So for you, let's just speak it into existence now. You're still a grad student, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. You're going to have a chance to still go as a student to football games this fall?
I should have that opportunity.
Okay. So let's just speak it into existence now that 2025, it's going to be the turnaround for you as a student in the student section.
I certainly hope that is the case this year. Yes, I knew you graduated in 2013, so I wasn't sure if that was the spring or winter. Okay, so you did get to experience that incredible season. I was just 10 years old at that point, but I can still remember it.
Now you're making me feel old. I just turned 34 last week. Thank you for that. So my graduation present from my uncle, who's also an Auburn alum, he's got 2 degrees from Auburn, one being a PhD. He gifted me a trip to the Rose Bowl to watch the Auburn Florida State National Championship game, and even with the heartbreak, there's only one other time in my life that I've ever felt just numb and heartbroken. It was the 2013 National Championship for Auburn football. It was the 2016 National Championship loss for Auburn softball, and I remember leaving the Rose Bowl thinking, what a great environment, what a great experience, what a great game. Hats off to Jimbo and Jameis at Florida State. That was a phenomenal game, but even then is with the heartbreak. I mean, I think about how great that team was when Nick Marshall, Sammy Coates was on that team, Trey Mason, just the talent and the great moments from that year. That's one of those games, even the loss, that's one, if I could go back and relive it, knowing the results, I would go back and do it again.
Yeah, so speaking on that, so I guess that would be probably some of your favorite memories from your time as a student?
Absolutely, and although I graduated at that point, but my time as a student, I had some awesome memories. One, working Auburn softball and Auburn soccer as a student. Auburn soccer, I actually got a chance to call the SEC Tournament Championship. Auburn fell to Florida, I believe, in 2012 down in Orange Beach. And I was sitting there thinking, wow, a kid from XO, Alabama is on the radio covering an SEC Tournament Championship game, regardless of sport. And I was also an Auburn baseball manager my first year at Auburn.
I didn't know that.
Met one of my best friends who is still great friends to this day, in each other's weddings, going on family vacations together. We're managers together. And Link Jarrett, the head coach at Florida State, was one of the assistants at Auburn then, along with Scott Foxhall, who's now on Coach Thompson's staff here on an off-the-field role. But he also won a national championship. He was a pitching coach at Mississippi State a few years ago when they won that title. So a lot of good memories because you meet a lot of great people. But from a sports standpoint, it's hard to top the miracle in Jordan Hare, and also the kick six and all those things.
Absolutely, yeah. I can't imagine what it was like being in Jordan Hare Stadium for that. Of course, I was watching it on TV, but I know there had to be nothing like being in the stadium in that moment. As far as your broadcasting career goes, what are some of your favorite memories of some of your calls, maybe?
Sure. I'm one of those people, truthfully, I don't get too caught up in my calls specifically because I am, my wife tells me all the time, I am my hardest critic, and I rarely walk away thinking, man, I nailed that one. But I've certainly been a part of some special moments. I remember most recently, she just won National Player of the Year, Bree Ellis. She broke the freshman home run record. I remember that one from Clemson. Some of Maddie Pence's perfect games have been great, but at the top of the list was definitely Game 2 of the 2016 National Championship. Auburn defeats Oklahoma. Emily Carasoni hit a walk-off grand slam to send Auburn to a winner-take-all national title game that Auburn lost by a run the next night. But in that game, Tiffany Howard robbed a home run that would have been the game winner for Oklahoma. And I often think about that moment every time. One, I watch the World Series, or two, I'm just at the softball diamond. Some other great moments that I've really enjoyed. Auburn women's basketball, when they retired DeWanna Bonner's number a year ago. Beating Alabama that day was fun, but I think at the top of the list, two wins in particular. Auburn beat top 5 Coach J's first year at Auburn. Auburn beat top 5 Tennessee in Neville Arena, and then Auburn beat Kim Mulkey and LSU just 2 years ago in front of what was the largest women's basketball crowd in Neville. So I've been fortunate, very fortunate. I still ask myself often, how am I in this position? Because there are a lot of great broadcasters out there. There are a lot of great broadcasters at Weagle and who have come through Weagle who would do just as well, if not better than me. So it's one of those things, again, you don't take for granted. But thinking back, I'm very much a person. I try my best to live in the moment and look ahead. People ask me all the time, "Oh, do you have this call, that call?" Yeah, I've got a couple, but I don't have a lot. That's just never been in my MO, and something, truthfully, Carson, I should probably change about my broadcasting.
Well, give yourself credit. You do a fantastic job on your broadcasts, and I always, as I mentioned earlier, always enjoy listening to you. But those are really good memories, though. I can remember most of those games. I especially remember the softball and College World Series. Yeah. I actually saw on social media a few days ago or yesterday, whenever it was the anniversary of that Game 2 win for Auburn.
Well, and I'll take you back on a couple more. I mean, just in that year in 2016 in particular, I remember the first call from the Super Regionals. I remember that call word for word. It was 2015. Auburn defeated Louisiana. Auburn swept the Raging Cajuns, which, by the way, was a great team. I mean, seriously, I would compare them that year to as good as Coastal Carolina is in baseball this year. That's how good they were. And I remember vividly, I said, "Pack your bags, Auburn's headed to the College World Series." And I don't know where that came from or how that came out, but I remember sitting next to Tyler Pigg and Scott Scroggins in the Jamie Moorfield press box making that call. But even then, fast forwarding to 2016, just the big moments. I mean, I think about just the roster from Jade Rhodes at first, Emily Carasoni at second. I mean, you got 2 All-American caliber players there. Then you go to shortstop. Auburn had not 1 but 2 players tear their ACL that year, Kelsey Bogards and Haley Fagan. Haley actually was able to come back and get some at-bats towards the end of the year. Whitney Jordan stepped in, played a huge role, hit a huge home run, by the way, in that Game 2 national championship game against Oklahoma. Then you go to the hot corner at third, and you have a dear friend to this day, All-American Casey Cooper. And then, of course, you go to the outfield, and Tiffany Howard, Victoria Draper, and Brandon Malero, Maddie Gibson, even Morgan Estelle from 2015 to 2016. You had so many different players and so much talent. And then in the pitching circle, that was the one area of that team that I think back where that's what got Auburn to the national championship. Yes, Auburn's defense, but Auburn was just as deep in the circle. You had Lexi Davis and Marcy Harper, who played their entire careers here, all 4 years, and Auburn added 3 key pieces. Kaylee Carlson from North Carolina, Michaela Martin came in, and then, of course, Rachel Walters, she transferred in, the lefty from Radford. And Auburn had 5 pitchers that they could go to at any point in any game throughout the season. And when you have that kind of depth, it makes you really difficult to beat. And if you look at who they beat and how they beat them, I mean, back-to-back SEC tournament champions, that's just not something that happens every single year. 2016, Auburn had to go through, now listen to this, Auburn had to go through Alabama and Florida because of a rainout. They had to beat Alabama and Florida in the same day in 2016. My favorite day at a ballpark still was in Starkville, Mississippi. I got a chance to call. I wasn't at the 2015 one, but I got a chance to call the SEC Tournament Championship in 2016 where Auburn went back-to-back. And Auburn's win against Florida the day before, I thought Florida was the number 1 team in the country. I thought they were that good. And, of course, that year it turned out to be Oklahoma. Florida that year, though, Auburn beating them in Starkville, that was as good a game as Auburn softball, I thought, played in terms of the circle and defense. So some fond memories from News Park and Starkville. And, again, sorry if I rambled on. It's just
no, that's great. I really appreciate it.
It's the first time that I got a chance to, in a long time, to sit back and reminisce on that. And fun fact about that LSU game, Tiffany Howard hit her first career home run in that SEC Tournament Championship game. Carly Hoover great pitcher for Beth Torina was pitching that day, and I believe Auburn's pitching coach, by the way, current pitching coach Riker Chasen, he was a student assistant under Coach Torina.
Oh, wow.
And I believe he was part of that team in 2016 that played for the SEC Tournament Championship. So
nice connection there. Did not realize that.
Riker and I put that together about a month or two ago, and again, he's another one for the Malvos. Excited about he's got so much potential as a coach. His pitchers love him, and I'm just excited to see what he can do on the recruiting trail and also too in development, because everybody you talk to just outside of Auburn just raves about Riker and his potential. So again, that's just another key piece of what the Malvos are going to bring. Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you getting the chance to reminisce. I've enjoyed listening, and I can remember watching those games, and so it's nice that you're able to add some more details to those moments. And I hope for Auburn's sake that Auburn's able to create some more memories for you by having a lot of success in women's basketball and softball over the next several years. And as we've talked about on today's show with both Coach Larry Vickers and the Malvos in softball, I really think those are the right people to be leading these programs, and looking forward to watching them as their tenures continue and start for Coach Vickers here in the winter. But Britt, I really appreciate having you on the show today. I'm glad we got to get to a lot of topics and get to discuss a lot of things that I think are important to Auburn fans, that Auburn fans are interested in, and that I don't have the expertise on. So I really appreciate you coming on today.
I appreciate it as well. I don't know how much expertise I have either, but for Auburn and for Weagle, and by the way, the partnership that you guys have with Auburn Sports Properties to broadcast Auburn softball, you guys broadcast Auburn soccer and Auburn volleyball. Just incredibly proud of the work and the product that you all put out, and again, also along with the podcast, and I look forward to helping you guys along and helping you guys achieve your goals, and especially for you, appreciate the opportunity to come on today and reminisce a bit. I look forward to the next one.
Well, I absolutely will have to have you on again, and I am incredibly grateful for Weagle and the opportunities that Weagle has given me as a student, and now even after I've graduated from my undergrad, just the opportunities that Weagle still has given me, and I'm very grateful to be able to do this podcast. And thank you all for listening. If you haven't already, I please ask that you just like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And thank you again, and we'll be back with another edition of Talking Tumors next week.